Good evening, everyone. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Zachary Agush, Principal Planner at RIPTA and also the Project Manager for the Metro Connect Alternatives Analysis. This evening, I want to give you all a sense of what the study is about, why we are doing it, and what we're hoping to accomplish, and how individuals in the room and outside of the room can be involved going forward. And so the agenda it consists of 3 items, or rather 4 for that matter. What is high-capacity transit? Give you a little bit of background and context as to where we are. What is the purpose and goals of the project? Give you an understanding of the timeline and the next steps. What do I mean by high-capacity transit? What I mean is ultimately a service that has an emphasis on being more competitive than driving in one's single occupancy vehicle. And that is combined through improved speed, improved reliability, enhanced capacity, better convenience, and ultimately a better experience for the rider. As you can see, this really can range from a number of enhancements ranging from paying for one's fare off board before boarding a vehicle, unique branding. So as many people may have traveled the airline, it has its own identity. This service would certainly have its own. Transit signal priority, providing vehicles the ability to bypass congestion by getting shorter red lights or longer green lights. Enhanced stations, so right now RIPTA bus stops, as you know, really vary in quality and expectation. And so any service that we provide, whether it's bus-based or rail-based, would have its own station that would include sheltering, real-time information screens, lighting, voice recording, and so forth. But I think the most important thing to really stress here is high-capacity transit really is a fixed guideway network. And what I mean by fixed guideway, and this is the first of many technical terms that I'll be bringing up, is really dedicated right of way for a transit vehicle, whether that's a bus or naturally a train, because it will need tracks. And ultimately, this is allowing us to operate without being in mixed traffic, which is key for service reliability and speed. So background. The idea of high-capacity transit really stems from the development and adoption of the transit master plan known as Transit Forward RI back in 2020. And within that master plan, it really highlights 5 major categories: improving existing services, expanding services to new areas, develop high-capacity transit, which I'll get to in a moment, improving access to transit, and making service easier to use. Transit Forward RI is the state's first ever statewide transit master plan. And so as you can see on the map here, really emphasizing better service frequency span, really better connecting the whole ocean state at large. But I really want to key in on high-capacity transit. When we articulate this in the master plan, it really can stretch from what is called rapid bus, very much like the R line today with 10-minute frequency, with some separated right-of-way, but predominantly mixed traffic, to regional rapid transit, which is really more connecting our larger regional areas, whether that's Woonsocket or Newport, with more frequent service and more limited stops along the way, or in particular to this project, bus rapid transit or light rail. And those are particularly in these 2 deep red corridors kind of in the center of the map, and I'll get into it in a second. When we were doing the master plan, how we arrived at those particular red lines was really looking at what was the transit propensity for transit service in these particular areas. And on the map here, you see anything from really deep dark green to gray. And each of those really define a level of potential propensity to ride transit. As you can see, some of the highest levels of transit demand in Rhode Island, and really in all of New England, is Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Providence. And this is really based on the fact that due to the streetcar networks of the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, a lot of the jobs and housing were located close to each other. And we've managed to hold on to that well over into the last 20, 30 years. And that's actually been very beneficial because these are higher densities than are seen in many other regions of the U.S. today. One important note to stress is that while there are areas in the map as you look, down in Cranston and Warwick where there are pockets of yellow and red, that doesn't mean that transit can't be served. It just means that the demand is lower. And so as we're doing our work, we're going to be looking to see how we provide the best service to these areas as well. I think one important note to bring up, and we hear this a lot about RIPTA in comparison to a lot of other transit services across the country, is that we as an operator actually serve more riders than many of the transit systems in larger urban areas. And some notable examples include Kansas City, Nashville, and Indianapolis, 3 of which have actually gotten significant transit capital projects funded by FTA over the last decade. Besides the increased speed, access, and reliability, high-capacity transit, in tandem with the rest of the master plan, has the potential to generate thousands of new jobs, whether it's in the plan implementation or expanded operations of service, increasing business opportunity, development and significant transit-oriented development. But I think what I want to really stress is helping us improve upon many of the state goals that have been really articulated over the last 5 years, whether that's preventing and fighting against climate change, increasing housing opportunity, sustainable growth in the urban core. When it comes to climate in particular, what I find intriguing is if the totality of the master plan were to be implemented, and these are 2020 numbers, and we're in the process of updating them now, we could be reducing metric tons of greenhouse gases by well over 150,000 per year, and reduce the number of vehicle mile traveled to nearly the target that is required in order for us to meet the Act on Climate. We are in the process of updating these numbers. We should have them in tandem with the long-range transportation plan update later this year. So at the crux of it, what is this study? The main purpose really is to find ways to provide fast, reliable, and frequent transit that connects our various regional activity centers, our neighborhoods, and major transportation hubs in the Providence area, while achieving other state goals, such as I mentioned before, climate, sustainable housing growth, public health, boosting the economy. But what's critical is in a fair and equitable manner as well. This statement is still very much in draft form. We are working with a number of stakeholders across the state on varying levels to really hone in on what is the appropriate statement. So if you go to the project website, there's a far more in-depth document that is not just the purpose statement, but also talking about the needs and the goals and the objectives of the project as well. What we are working on, the crux in the heart of the project, is assessing the potential for high-capacity transit connecting the localities of Cumberland, Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence, Cranston, and Warwick. As you see on the map, there are 2 corridors. One in the west, Cumberland to Central Falls to CCRI Warwick via Providence, and in the east, downtown Providence to TF Green. I should state that these corridors are not either or. We are evaluating both, and we are coming up with final alternatives for both. And I say this because we've had many people ask us, oh, if RIPTA decides to only do one, are we never going to talk about the other? We are doing both. We are doing both in tandem. And it's critical to stress this highly, that we cannot achieve that alternative without robust public engagement to ensure that the community's vision is reflected in what the final alternative is. We know there are many communities that are looking at complete streets. We know there are communities looking to transform major corridors into mixed-use development. It is important to take those into account. And so individuals participating now and in the future are going to play a critical role in helping us arrive at that final conclusion. As I said, goals, as a transit operator, obviously our natural goal is to grow transit ridership. And that is not just with this, but ultimately along with a lot of implementation of the Transit Master Plan. We want to enhance connectivity. While this may be one corridor, it's important to emphasize that it is part of a larger integrated vision. And so we will be looking, as we were developing an implementation strategy, of how to ensure that connectivity is achieved. We want to advance equity. We are working on a project that obviously will be significant for the entire region. But there are many capital projects across the country that have been done for transit that, while bringing greater mobility, have also had potential impacts that need to be mitigated. And whether that is around gentrification, in particular, we want to figure out how to mitigate that and help improve upon equity as best we can in the process. We want to support sustainable growth. And that's not just in housing and public health, but that's also in ensuring that we're connecting folks to workforce opportunities. At the end of the day, we also want to focus on what is a practical and a feasible solution too. There are many projects that sound great on paper until you actually look at them in the field. And at the end of the day, RIPTA is not going to be the only source of funding for this project, and we want to make sure that whatever we present is something that won't take 25 years, but also is financially sound as well. So in terms of timeline, this red bar shows where we are today. We have largely arrived at the end of our data collection. There is still some outstanding collection in terms of modeling for the assessment. And we're getting very close to fulfilling the completion of our existing conditions report. We're also in the process of writing a future conditions report, both of which serve as major foundations for the alternatives analysis, helping us understand what we have today and what is the potential based on current baseline. And as you can see, we have already begun reaching out to the public, stakeholders, and to agencies for the project. We'll be engaging not just in this round, but there will be multiple other rounds throughout the process at particular milestones. And we will be starting the true alternatives analysis within the next month. As you can see, we will really be getting into the weeds of the project over the winter and into the early spring, and hope to arrive more or less at a group of scenarios of what potential alternatives look like by spring. Our current timeline has us having a draft final report and ultimately a final report by the summer of 2025. There have been many folks who have asked me, when you have finished the study next summer, what do you do next? That really comes down to a conversation with RIPTA's board of directors, who will obviously hear the local preferred alternatives and will be seeked to get their support on what that alternative is and for both of those corridors. If the board is behind it, then that's the conversation with municipal leaders, city councils, mayors, and then ultimately state. And if everyone is on the same page, and if the community is on board with that alternative, then the conversation becomes converting these into proper projects for FTA's consideration. So this project obviously has a lifespan of at least 16 months, but I think it's important to state that a project like this has to start now, given the processes that are involved to making it a reality. So we are about to enter what I consider phase 2, which is called assess. And that is really looking at the alternatives and evaluating them, and really engaging with everybody to really not only select, but also refine it. And this is really the heart of the project. And so I really do encourage folks to participate in the process. If there is an opportunity to come to a meeting such as this, or an opportunity to go to an organization that might be sponsoring an event, if you just happen to come by RIPTA and have questions, ask them. Be involved in the process. So before I wrap up, I do want to explain what this term alternatives analysis is. I've said it several times in the conversation this evening and at several meetings prior to this. It is a very technical process. It's something that we as a state and a lot of agencies don't typically go through. It's really for those very intensive capital projects. And so in this case, it's really a 3-step process. And it really starts with what we call an initial screening, or a universe of ideas. And that is taking a whole wide range of what is presented to us by the public and what we have seen in our data, and really comparing them against the project purpose, the needs, and the goals. And for those that pass that screening, we carry them forward. For those that don't meet it, they get thrown out, because the intent is to focus on what is possible. And the second step is what we consider tier 1, and that is where we are testing different alignments, particularly segments of roadway, for each segment of the corridor. So it might work on section A may work better than section B, or C or D, so forth. And then in the second evaluation, or step C, we're looking at the entire route, and we're testing the best alignments as a complete route. And from that set, we'll arrive at a short list of what alternatives we want to present to the public. And that will ultimately result in what we call the locally preferred alternative. So this is going to happen over the latter half of the fall, into the winter, and throughout the early part of the spring. In terms of public outreach in the coming weeks, and really in the near term, we do have a project website, very simple, ripta.com/metroconnector. We do have a newsletter that is being constructed as we speak, which will be updating people on meetings and events. We do have a survey that if you were to hover your delightful smartphone over this QR code, you can fill that out. It's giving us a better sense of initial ideas from the public, particular concerns that we should be aware of. That will close on October 7th. Obviously, folks are here tonight. We have a public meeting. We have another one scheduled on October 9th at the RIC Workforce Development Hub in Central Falls. And we are in the process of scheduling a session in Cranston, and we will share that information with the public soon. But it's also important that while we do have public meetings, I know there are many organizations that also want to meet, whether with their membership or want to set up something with others in tandem. And so we are in the process of scheduling such presentations and discussions with those folks about this project, and we've already had some organizations express some interest. And if there are organizations that are interested, don't hesitate to email metroconnector@ripta.com. We will schedule those. And if anyone does email that particular email address, that will come to me, and I will respond to those questions that may come up.